Hey, what's going on, guys? Bluntguts here. This is a Watcher of Realms video. Truly appreciate you tuning into my channel as I do break down Malrik's damage in both of his forms, both his single target, his fire form, and his AoE form, his frost form. Now, I unfortunately am having to reshoot this video at a very late hour. I did promise I would get it out. Unfortunately, the previous iteration, which was an amazing video, put a lot of time and effort into it, got deleted. And so I am re-recording at nearly 2 in the morning because I'm a crazy person. I want to get this information out there before the banner does come, and I am going out of town starting tomorrow. So this is my last-ditch effort to get the info out there. I probably am going to move through this a lot quicker than I would otherwise, but you know, suffice it to say, I do hope that the information is useful. But before I do get to the testing, please do click that thumbs up button. Please do subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate it. I put a lot of effort in these videos. Put more effort in the one that got deleted, unfortunately, but I do put a lot of energy into the testing, and it really does mean a lot to me when you guys do subscribe. So please do click that thumbs up button, promote the video, subscribe to my channel. It's a free way that you can support me. It really is appreciated. Let's go talk about his single target damage. So I did the single target damage testing in Nightmare 4 Guild Boss 1, and I did use the team that is on the screen right here. I used an Infernal team because I do believe that if you are using him in single target, this is going to be his preferred faction. Esotericists, at least right now, do not have a strong backbone of single target damage dealers. Now, I think that will change because Nastia is coming, but as of right now, this is really going to be your best option if you do want to use Malrik in a single target capacity. I've got Lyra in there, who I do think is a pretty direct comparison to Malrik. She is a single target mage that does provide a bit of utility via her magic resistance debuff. Hex is in there as another damage dealer as well. Now, I know he's not a mage, he's a marksman, but he is a single target platform magic damage dealer. Beyond that, he is somebody that has been tested many, many times, both in my videos and in other folks' videos. As a result, he's a very good measuring stick for Malrik. So I wanted him to be in there so we get an idea of exactly how much damage Malrik was outputting relative to Hex at equivalent awakening levels. I've also got Diaochin in there to provide consistent inspiration as well as her penetration buff to all 3 heroes that are in here. Because Diaochin does provide inspiration throughout the entire fight, there's no concern about one unit or the other getting more benefit, having better timing on their ultimates, things like that, getting more out of the inspiration buff from like a Constance or a Dolores. I've also got Elowen in there for rage regen. Let's take a look at an example of the run that I did. Then I'll go to the spreadsheet. I'll show you exactly what I found out about Malrik. All right, first off, I will have a link to this data in the description of this video, so if you do have questions or you do want to kind of go through it a little bit more thoroughly, you're more than welcome to. Feel free to ask me questions in the comments or log onto my Discord, hit me up directly. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you might have. So on the left-hand side, I do have a breakdown of the results that I did get in here. I've got the damage testing at every single awakening level for Hex, Lyra, and Malrik. After A0, I do have a delta row, which does show the % damage gained going from the previous awakening to the current awakening. So in the case of the A1 delta row, the A3 delta row is the difference from going from A1 to A3, etc., etc. So generally speaking, what we see here is that Hex was by far the highest damage dealer for every single awakening level. As such, he is kind of the baseline. That's why I have him in there. The other thing that is of note is that Lyra and Malrik were relatively close to one another throughout. Lyra did separate herself more and more as the awakenings did accrue. So by the time they were both at A5, she was doing about 30% more damage than he was. But even considering that, Malrik did start off lower than the others. The biggest awakening here was going from A1 to A3, Every single hero in this test did gain more damage going from A1 to A3 than any other Awakening jump. So Hex gained 37.5% damage going from A1 to A3, Lyra gained 45.64% damage, and Malrik gained 28.62% damage. That is by far the biggest one. Going from A3 to A5 gave him basically nothing. Going from A0 to A1 did not give him a whole lot either. So it really is all about getting to that A3 to maximize his personal damage. That being said, it's pretty low. At A5, he's only doing about 46% of Hex's A5 damage, so really not all that great. Nothing to write home about. It's okay damage, don't get me wrong, but it is not good damage by any measure. So I don't think that he's somebody that you're really going to want to invest heavily in order to get a lot of Awakenings, because the best version of Malrik is just really not all that great. Also in this tab, I do have a breakdown of the gear and stats that were used on these heroes. I did have Hex in his max exclusive. I did have Lyra and Malrik in max tier of Twilights. The rest of the stats are roughly equivalent. You can go through them at your discretion. Again, if you do have questions, feel free to sound off in the comments. Finally, I do have a table down here at the bottom where I've compared Lyra and Malrik's damage relative to Hex at all Awakening levels. Essentially, this is a summary of the data that was in that previous table, but I did want to mention it. Let's go talk about the AoE damage testing. All right, so I did test Malrik as an esotericist. I think that makes sense. There are a bunch of really strong AoE magic damage dealers in the esotericist faction, so I thought that made sense. I tested him against Anora, Boreas, and Comet, all three of which are very strong AoE mages. Anora was on the left side of Gear Raid 1. Boreas and Comet and Malrik were on the right-hand side. They were receiving buffs from Diao-Chan. Anora did not. Anora cannot actually receive buffs because of her kit. She can't even receive rage regen from Elowen, although I did provide that to the other units. Anora, as far as I know anyway, can only receive rage regen from Laurel. With that being said, she still did quite well in this. I am going to show you an example of the runs that I did do to collect this data. Then I'll go to the spreadsheet and I'll walk you through what I did find. Let's take a look. Here are the results from the AoE damage testing. Again, I will have a link to this data in the description of this video, so feel free to go and peruse it at your leisure. But what we saw is that, kind of similar to the single target damage test, we had one hero who was consistently on top. Anora was by far the highest damage dealer in this test. Comet and Boreas were not as far off as Lyra and Malrik were in the other one. Malrik, as an AoE damage dealer, though, was very subpar in this testing, and that was really disappointing to me personally. Now, a couple of notes about this testing in particular. First, I'm not testing absolute damage in this. What I'm testing is damage share, because when you do clear Gear Raid 1, the sum of the health of all of the different enemies in there, all of the different mobs in there, is static. There is a certain amount of damage that you can do. So what I'm looking at is, how is the distribution of the damage changing as I awaken these heroes? So the percent of total damage row that is below each one of these awakenings represents the percent of the total damage done that each hero did do. So in the case of Anora, at A0, she did do 32.83% of the damage done in the run. Malrik, on the other hand, did 11.06%, and that was pretty consistent throughout. The other thing I do want to acknowledge here is that this testing was not great for Malrik as far as the setup was concerned. Boreas, Comet, and Anora all have increased range relative to Malrik, but at the end of the day, that is just a function of their kits, and it is an inherent advantage that they do have because of the way that they are built. So it is what it is. There is not really a perfect AoE testing environment in the game right now that I'm aware of. I don't know if there was a better spot that I could have tested Malrik, but what I can say is that the difference between Malrik and all these other heroes is massive. No matter what disadvantages Malrik had, there is no situation where he would have bridged this gap significantly. You could make the argument that his damage is artificially low here, but what you can't really do is make the argument that he should have been on par with any of these other heroes. So let's briefly go through the results that I did get here. Malrik, across all these awakenings, did 10 to 12% of the total damage in the run. Despite being one of 4 damage dealers in the run, it was pretty subpar. Anora was pretty consistently in the low to mid 30s, and Comet and Boreas kind of fluctuated between 26% and 30% themselves. What is kind of note is that the awakenings for Boreas, Comet, and Anora all do just outpace Malrik. So you do see a trend of his damage diminishing past A1. He's doing 11% of the damage at A0, 12.51 at A1, 9.87 at A3, and 10.08 at A5. Now, none of those values are all that different, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bit of RNG at play there, but either way, he is just not really pulling his weight. Like the other sheet, I do have a summary of the gearing that was used. I did try to keep all of these heroes relatively close to one another gear-wise. Everybody was in a tier of Twyla, with the exception of Anora, who did have her max exclusive artifact. I've also, similar to the other table, I've got this damage relative to Anora table down at the bottom, where I have kind of summarized the amount of damage that each of these heroes did at each awakening level relative to Anora, who was, again, consistently the top damage dealer across all awakenings. So what can we take from this? The damage was not great. I would say that comparing single target to AoE, as far as damage dealing was concerned, his single target damage was significantly better than his AoE damage. The AoE damage was just not there, unfortunately. Now, that's not super surprising, because at the end of the day, I don't think his AoE form is really meant to do damage. Very similar to Ingrid, every 5th attack, Malrik will do a special basic attack. When he is in his Frost form, he does this Ice Storm ability, which deals 45% AoE damage, 1 time per second to the target, and 5 surrounding enemies for 4 seconds, with a 50% chance to inflict Winter's Bite. Winter's Bite, if you don't know, is a stacking slow, which when it reaches 3 stacks, does freeze the target. It is a very, very powerful crowd control ability. There are very few heroes that can actually apply this. Mainly, I'm thinking of Anora, Ymiret, and Lynx. So the more heroes you have applying this debuff, the better it becomes, because you're more easily able to stack it up and freeze targets over and over and over again. He is, based on what I've seen, the best hero in the game at doing this. He is the best hero at applying Winter's Bite. I think as an AoE hero, he is primarily there as a crowd control hero, and I think that's okay, especially given his faction. He can be an esotericist alongside of Anora. I think you could even use him in a cultist team, because his damage is not all that great. You're not really giving up all that much by not having him aligned faction-wise. The damage was not great in either form, but this Wizard's Rune ability is really, really good, and this is what we should focus on. Increases attack, defense, and HP of the Rune Bearer by 15%. This effect can stack with other effects. It means that you can pick one unit, and you can essentially give them another Lord basic attributes bonus. It's incredibly powerful, and it's something that I think everybody should want on their account. The question really is it worth pulling for the Awakenings? And quite honestly, I don't think it is, based on the results that I have seen here, but sound off in the comments. Let me know what you think. Again, I will have a link to this data in the description of the video, so please do feel free to go and peruse that. Let me know what you think. I'm sorry to be a little bit briefer than I normally am. Maybe that's a good thing, though. I don't know. Ultimately, I am exhausted, and I'm just trying to get this video out before I do leave for the weekends. I do hope that it is helpful to some folks. I also want to mention, I did say I was going to do a crowd control breakdown. I don't think I'm going to have time for that. If I do, I will put it out. But suffice it to say that when combined with Anora and Ymiret, those 3 combined are essentially able to slow units down to the equivalent of a Mari. Actually, I did track a bit more crowd control, a bit better of an ability to slow down a pack of enemies than Mari was able to do in that setup. So very, very cool. I do think that he is going to be somebody who is useful in GVG. Unlike Mari, he does bring a bit of damage. Not much, obviously, as you saw, but she doesn't bring any, essentially. So this is going to be an upgrade from that perspective. And of course, the Wizard's Rune thing is pretty fantastic as well. So in any case, y'all, I do appreciate it. As I said before, please do click that thumbs up button. Please do subscribe to my channel. I really need your help, because if I don't get enough subscriptions, my wife is going to take away my toys, and I'm not going to be able to play the game anymore. In any case, y'all, like I said, sound off in the comments. I appreciate it. Have a good night. Good luck to you. I will catch you all next time.